All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm Kevn, DeAnna. Last week, we had another shooting in Minneapolis with another shitlib suicide bomber deciding to physically confront federal law enforcement while armed, with predictable results. The same people who thought it was hilarious when Ashley Babbitt was shot at the Capitol suddenly are outraged. The same conservative and libertarian leaders who were nowhere to be found when the J6ers were being tortured in jails are now furrowing their brows about limited government and the Constitution. But the bigger story is this. Over the last few days, it's become very clear that Minneapolis, and Minnesota generally, is at the center of what can only be called a low-level insurgency against federal authority. This has been building for a very long time, and it's a very sophisticated movement. And a lot of people are saying things like, why isn't President Trump deporting more people? Why is he focusing on Minneapolis? Well, he is deporting more people in red states. The difference is that you can do it there very easily. You don't have to send armed bands of guys running around the city looking for people because you just go to the jails and pick them up. When we really take a step back and think about what's actually happening here and how outrageous it is, you have the worst of the worst being actively defended by state authorities, local authorities, the entire media, and left-wing paramilitaries simply because it's that important to them to defend illegal immigration no matter what. And we can talk about the shootings, we can break down the various angles, maybe we'll get into the protests in a second, but really it comes down to this question. We got to stick to what's important here. Do state and local authorities have the right to simply not comply with federal law enforcement on immigration? Because the necessary result of that is either you don't obey the law at all, in which case you have guys who are convicted of serious crimes, they just get to stay in the country forever, which seems to be the intent, or we just don't have a country. And it also guarantees that you're going to have as many violent confrontations as possible. If protesters are going to actively interfere with ICE operations, especially with the media covering for them, and local law enforcement not doing anything to help, you're just going to get more of this. And you're going to get more violence, and you're going to get more shootings, which seems to be the intent. And here's the irony. What is the critique of Donald Trump from the right on this, including people like me? Oh, we're not getting mass deportations because he's not going after the illegals who are working at like the meat packing plants and hotels and things like that. And this is not an unfair critique. For example, this is President Trump talking recently.
Many countries opened up their prisons and dropped them into the United States. Those are the people who are getting out. And we have a lot of heart. They said, you got to lighten up on this. We have a lot of heart for people. They came in illegally, but they're good people, and they're working now on farms, and they're working in luncheonettes and hotels and all. And we're looking to get the criminals out right now, the criminals. And I think it's very important. I mean, every once in a while you see a story, we take somebody. He should be out because they came in illegally. So in theory, they should be. But we're focused on the murderers, the drug dealers, the mentally insane. We have a lot of mentally insane killers. I mean, you can't even talk to them. It'd be nice if you could have a little reason, but you can't even reason. These are seriously ill people. You have a couple of countries where they were loaded up. Their mental institutions and insane asylums were loaded to the gills. They couldn't get. They're empty now. But they're filling up because we're bringing them all back. We know where they came from. And every country accepts them. You know, under Biden, they wouldn't say, they had so little respect that they'd bring them there and they wouldn't take them. They say, get the hell out of here. They would be bringing a plane in to land in a country.
I mean, there it is, right? We've got a lot of heart for people who came in illegally, but they're good people, as if that matters, and as if we can measure such a thing. And they're working on farms and such like that. But as many have pointed out, if you want these people to go, like you actually want mass deportations, if you actually want these people to go, you got to go after the jobs magnet. You got to debank them. You got to seize remittances. You got to aggressively prosecute using fraudulent Social Security numbers. And above all, you have to go after the employers. And that's the problem, because that's when people are going to freak out, because many of these guys are going to turn out to be powerful corporate leaders and probably GOP donors, as has already happened in some cases. So what is he doing? Again, if you look at the polls on this, if you ask the American people, do you want to go after illegal immigrants all illegal immigrants, you're going to get less support for that than you are for just going after the criminals. So what is the president doing? He's doing what the polls would suggest that the American people want, what whips like Joe Rogan want. Remember when Joe Rogan was like, oh, we don't want to have to go after the people mowing the lawns and everything else. You just go after the criminals. Okay, he's just going after the criminals. But what happens? The state and local leaders say, well, you know what? We're not even going to hand over the criminals to federal law enforcement. What happens if even that, even the bare minimum of what you're doing, leads to a giant confrontation? I mean, that's what a sanctuary city is. That's what a sanctuary state is. And of course, with the vast majority of these violent confrontations with ICE, they're only happening within like 9 counties in the entire country where you have these kinds of policies. All of this is completely unnecessary. I doubt the Trump administration even predicted this because it's so insane. But the media is covering for this too. So the question becomes, is there any scenario, is there any case, no matter how unsympathetic, where a deep blue locality is going to allow anyone to be deported for any reason? And the answer seems to be no. And people will fight and die to prevent that. That's where we're at. So where does that leave us? Because before we start talking about mass deportations and going after the employers and everything else, we got to deal with this. Because if we can't deal with this, we can't deal with anything. Now you can say, you certainly have seen this on X, on the conservative side all over the last week, why don't liberals care about this or that victim of illegal immigration? Didn't their lives matter? Oh, look at this. Here's the reality. In a social context, nobody's life matters. It matters when the media makes an issue of it. Until then, it doesn't mean a thing. It matters when it's politically useful. It matters when people can fit it into the racial justice and anti-fascist metapolitics that has been the real religion of the West since World War II. That's when it matters. Until then, it doesn't matter. You get shot in the face by a black guy tomorrow, that's barely news. A black guy says he's going to kill you and you drop the hard R, that's the biggest story in the state and your life is over. Hell, if recent legal precedents are any indication, if he stabs you first and you drop a hard R as you're bleeding out, he didn't even commit a crime. He's going to get acquitted. I mean, we remember this from last year. This happened. Now, consider what you're dealing with in Minneapolis. If you look at what DHS and the Trump administration are posting, you can say that the guys they're picking up are some of the worst criminals imaginable. These are the people the protesters are defending with their bodies, quite frankly, who they're dying for in 2 cases so far. And there'll probably be more. Doesn't matter. Doesn't even enter into the equation. For the same reason the hysterical resist libs you know are going to burst into tears over Emmett Till 60 years ago, 70 years ago, whenever it was. But they'll remain completely unmoved about a black person killing a white person yesterday. If anything, they might feel some quiet satisfaction. Ordinary crime is just part of daily life. It's random. It has no moral significance. It's either unfortunate or really it's a reflection of the fact we don't give the blacks and the browns enough money and they strike back against the privilege. And so, we kind of have it coming. But government officials wearing uniforms, arresting non-white criminals, that's fascism. That's morally important. That gives meaning to my life of watching television. And you think, look, you're overstating this. It can't really be that simple. Like, people are more complicated than this, right? Like, our entire society can't just be running off the playbook of half-remembered movie plots and vague complaints about Nazism from 70 years ago. No, that's actually what I'm saying it is. It is that simple. So on CNN, some guy with a pink hat, apparently that you get to be on CNN for this, claiming ICE might eventually start putting people in ovens.
I understand that, but they take people to Fort Snelling here, which literally was built as a concentration camp, and Alligator Alcatraz, which I think we can all agree is a concentration camp. Not saying they're Dachau. I'm not saying they're putting people in ovens yet, but these are concentration camps.
Okay.
I don't need to argue with you about that.
Well, that's just some guy, right? I mean, it's not like it's a government official or someone high in the Democratic Party or somebody who actually matters in the current situation saying ridiculous things.
We have got children in Minnesota hiding in their houses, afraid to go outside. Many of us grew up reading that story of Anne Frank. Somebody's going to write that children's story about Minnesota.
Yeah, like it's really that straightforward. It's really that people are told obviously ridiculous things, are shown a sad picture and told to feel certain things, and they just do it. Like meat puppets, devoid of sentience, animated by pure electronic signals, and that's how policy is made. That's what it is. That's what I mean when I say democracy is ruled by media. We don't want to believe it's this straightforward and stupid, but it is. And of course, get into something that might get me in trouble a little bit, media doesn't move everyone the same way. I mean, women tend to be moved by this kind of thing more easily. There's a really interesting study called Empathetic Neural Responses Are Modulated by the Perceived Fairness of Others. I'll spare you the details, but I give you the title so you can look it up for yourself. Here's what happened. They have people playing a game, and they would occasionally punish people for no reason or for unfair behavior. They would inflict pain on the people in this study. And what they found, that if you were inflicting pain on people for no reason, the men would empathize with those people, but they would not empathize with the people being punished. However, the women would sympathize with everyone. So one study, small sample size, dangerous to draw some sweeping social conclusion, but here it is anyway. Why is it that a gang member, a rapist, a murderer gets tears and protests and sacrifices from hysterical women and effeminate men? Because that's what they're being shown. And all they know is the suffering of the criminal they see before them. It's not that it's divorced from context. It's that the context literally doesn't matter. And the victims of the criminal just don't get on TV. So really, they don't exist. They don't actually matter in a social context. And that's it. Like, it's that stupid. It's that straightforward. That's how we're governed. So what we're really talking about in politics, what matters, it's not policy results. It's not what objectively is the most effective. It's not what allowed under the law. It's not what the law says. It's who can most easily manipulate masses of people through crude emotional triggers and so dictate outcomes. That's it. The rest is noise. And the more easily you are manipulated, the more of a slave to your emotions you are in this system, the more power you have. Which is why so much media coverage is just demanding you feel certain things. And of course, they skew the story to do that. And again, the facts don't matter. There's a saying in politics now, if you're explaining, you're losing. Any kind of context, anything where you're saying, well, look, this looks bad, but this is what actually happened, it's besides the point. You can't even let it get to that point. So for example, you all saw this. You had this story where they say, oh, there's this 5-year-old kid. Everybody ran with the story that ICE arrested or detained this 5-year-old kid. Now, if you think about it for 2 seconds, why would this happen? But it doesn't matter. The picture is all they saw. And of course, no, they did not arrest a 5-year-old because why? The kid's father was an illegal who abandoned the kid and ran away. The vice president said, what are you supposed to do in that position?
Vice President Pence, a local school district here is alleging ICE agents detaining a 5-year-old after preschool on Tuesday. We've also seen multiple American citizens detained by ICE or harassed by ICE in the last 6 weeks. Are you proud of how your administration is conducting this immigration crackdown here in Minnesota right now?
Well, I'm proud of the fact that we're standing behind law enforcement, and I'm proud of the fact that we're enforcing the country's laws. But, you asked a question about this 5-year-old kid. I actually saw this terrible story while I was coming to Minneapolis. We just left Toledo, Ohio this morning for an economic messaging event. And I see this story, and I'm a father of a 5-year-old, actually, a 5-year-old little boy. And I think to myself, oh my God, this is terrible. How did we arrest a 5-year-old? Well, I do a little bit more follow-up research. And what I find is that the 5-year-old was not arrested, that his dad was an illegal alien, and then when they went to arrest his illegal alien father, the father ran. So the story is that ICE detained a 5-year-old. Well, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to let a 5-year-old child freeze to death? Are they not supposed to arrest an illegal alien in the United States of America? If the argument is that you can't arrest people who have violated our laws because they have children, then every single parent is going to be completely given immunity from ever being the subject of law enforcement. That doesn't make any sense. No one thinks that makes any sense.
Now, does this explanation matter? No, it does not. So what you have is serious television news. These are the experts. These are the people we are trusting to inform us, running with things like this.
The growing outrage in Minneapolis, the images of a 5-year-old boy returning home from preschool, detained by ICE. Agents taking the boy and his father into custody. Vice President J.D. Vance in Minneapolis today defending ICE agents, claiming they were protecting the child, saying, what are they supposed to do? Matt Rivers in Minneapolis again tonight.
Tonight, the haunting images sparking a firestorm. A preschool boy standing in the Minnesota cold swept up in the ICE crackdown. School officials say 5-year-old Liam, wearing his blue hat and backpack, and his father, Adrian Alexander Conejo Arias, had just pulled into their suburban Minneapolis driveway Tuesday when agents took that father into custody. The school then saying an agent essentially used the 5-year-old as bait, directing him to see if anyone else was home before taking the boy away. The district saying Liam is among 4 students recently detained.
Now, again, it's up to you. Are they just journalists, big city journalists? Are they just helpless and naive and they don't understand? Or are they cynically lying to you? That's up to you. But I think I know what they're doing. And it's the same thing with this latest shooting. There's no scenario anywhere, ever, where law enforcement is detaining someone or confronting someone where you get to go in and confront officers physically and not get the crap kicked out of you. You'd be insane to think this. And if you went in armed and then started reaching for it because you think you had a gun or you didn't know that you had already been disarmed, but you go in and have this confrontation and touch an officer and you go in armed, yeah, you're probably going to get shot. This is common sense. We all know this. Does this mean you can't go to a protest with a gun? No. Does this mean you should not seek out a physical confrontation with the cops if you're carrying a gun? Yes, obviously. No one disagrees with any of this, but we have to turn our brains off and pretend actually this is a really complicated situation. No, it's not. These things are not just happening for no reason. In Minneapolis right now, you essentially have armed left-wing paramilitaries doing things that if you and I did them, we would be killed. Not arrested, not shot. We would be executed to the universal applause of every journalist, every human rights advocate, and of course, every conservatism Inc. pundit in the country. There'd be no nuance, there'd be no controversy. Everybody would say, this is fine. Things like, say, if we were setting up barricades in the middle of the city. Or just attacking federal officers as a mob.
Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back! Get back! Back up! What the fuck is wrong with you, asshole? You motherfuckers! You motherfuckers!
Or attacking vehicles in a parking lot because they might be vehicles of ICE. Maybe, maybe not, but who knows? But, we can just do that. Or smashing the hotel where agents might be staying at and the cops just kind of sit by and watch.
Oh, yeah! Back up. Oh, back up! Back up!
Not only will the local police not stop this, they will actually see it happening and then turn around to let it happen. Now again, oldest thing in the book, I'm already snickering. Imagine if the roles were reversed, but it's kind of the only way we can visualize this. Say one of us gets elected in some county in West Virginia. We're not rich, we're not talking a lot of money, but we say, you know what? We're not going to send federal taxes to DC because we don't want it spent on illegals. We don't want it spent on foreigners. Our people need help here. Feds come. What do? We set up barricades. We attack federal law enforcement. We don't shoot anybody, but we attack them. The governor says, you know what? We're at war with the federal government. That's Walz did originally. Calls in the National Guard, not to suppress disorder, but to give coffee and donuts to the protesters, as just happened in Minnesota.
It's almost Valentine's Day. Get a shot of those, though.
But thank you all.
See how it goes. Cup of coffee, sir? Crispy one on the end. At least hot chocolate? Got donuts.
And we're running around armed, and we're saying all these kinds of things, and we're attacking the place where they're staying. What do you think happens in that situation? It's not arrests. It's not controversy. It's not, well, the Constitution. No, everybody dies. Everybody just dies, and nobody cares. Why? The left is serious, the right is not. What the Trump administration is doing in Minneapolis is about a moderate thing as you could possibly do when it comes to immigration. It's as moderate a response as you could possibly have. Because if you can't round up the worst of the worst in a city like this without militant resistance, then there's no point in doing anything. And if you just get to assert that federal law enforcement can be ignored or that immigration law can be ignored, then why do we have to pay our taxes? Why do we have a country? Why do we have a military? Why do anything? Why bother with any of this? I mean, really, two things are going on here. It's emotional blackmail, and it's the Moat and Bailey fallacy. You know this. This is the old fortification. The Bailey is the stuff you want, your valuable stuff. It's harder to defend, right? In this case, it's an argument. The argument that the left is really making, that they want you to believe. People need to be allowed into this country for any reason. Rapist, child molester, murderer, gang member, doesn't matter. The more the merrier. They get to stay. There's no reason you can remove them. That's morally legitimate. Oh, you have kids. Well, I guess we just can't arrest you because, you have kids, and that would separate the family. That would make them sad. Here's a sad picture that'll make women cry. That would break up the family. Now, of course, that doesn't apply to you and I. I have kids. If I get arrested, I go to jail. My kids might be sad, but nobody cares. But that's the standard they're going with illegals. Now, you think about it for 5 seconds. You go, well, that's completely insane. Oh, we don't want armed federal agents roaming around cities arresting people. We don't want masked people rounding people up. We're opposed to open borders. We don't want deportation. We agree that we don't want open borders, but we want deportations done in a way where nobody gets hurt, where nobody's sad, where there's no confrontation. Well, now the rhetoric's changing. Now it's not, well, people have a right to stay here no matter what. It's, well, of course we agree immigration law matters, but it has to be done the right way. And that's the Mott. That's the more defensible location that you retreat to, where people say, you know what? It's insane to say that just because people have kids, you can't arrest them. It's insane to say that you just can't remove anybody for no reason. It's insane to say that we have open borders. Well, nobody's saying that we have open borders. We're just saying that you have to enforce these laws the right way. Oh, you arrested somebody and made somebody sad? Here's a sad picture. That's the wrong way. You're not allowed to do that. I mean, really what's happening is they're going for the unlimited argument every single time. And it's just a question of whether you fall for this. I mean, people talk about force, people talk about strength, people talk about toughness, people talk about guns and all this kind of stuff. No, none of this matters in politics now. The only thing that matters is moral courage. Like Pat Buchanan said, force rooted in justice backed by moral courage. What does that mean? It means not giving in to emotional blackmail and bad faith arguments by your political enemies. You don't actually have to listen to these people. You don't actually have to let their fake tears move you. Politics is a zero-sum game. There's no scenario where you get good boy points for going along with this nonsense. Now, the true question, of course, is not whether you and I fall for this, but whether the administration has. Mixed signals thus far. So, yesterday, President Trump saying last night there were positive conversations with Mayor Jacob Frey of Minneapolis and Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. These were the things he posted. We won't go through it because we can just listen to what he said this morning in an interview.
But I had two very good talks. I had Jacob Frey and I had Governor Walz, and I mean they were great calls. So let's see how they report it. But they were very nice calls, very respectful.
So is there a possibility, President Trump, of some type of compromise? I read that some of the Guard will be leaving the state of Minnesota, some type of compromise to, I guess, make those guys feel like they're in charge, even though, God help us.
Yeah, well, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think so. What we need is their criminals. You know, they have criminals, and all I said, just give us your criminals. And if you give us the criminals, it all goes away. They're there to pick up murders. I don't know if you saw, but it was a couple of days ago announced that crime is the lowest in the history of our country, the recorded history of our country.
Wow.
That's a big statement. That's because of us. That's because we go into cities and towns. Usually we're embraced. Sometimes we're not. Chicago is like pulling teeth with Pritzker and with the mayor of Chicago, low IQ person. And usually we're embraced, but sometimes we're not. And when we're not, it just makes it harder.
Now, again, already I can feel some of you getting uncomfortable. These are words we don't like. Compromise, it all goes away. They're looking for a way out, right? Like, we're not doing no holds barred. We're going to arrest all these subversives and whatever. We're going to break these people once and for all. This is the moderate policy. And for his part, Jacob Frey, mayor, said the following, quote, I spoke with President Trump today and appreciated the conversation. I expressed how much Minneapolis has benefited from our immigrant communities and was clear that my main ask is that Operation Metro Surge needs to end. The president agreed the present situation can't continue. Some federal agents will begin leaving the area tomorrow, and I will continue pushing for the rest involved in this operation to go. Minneapolis will continue to cooperate with state and federal law enforcement on real criminal investigations, but we will not participate in unconstitutional arrests of our neighbors or enforce federal immigration law. Violent criminals should be held accountable based on the crimes they commit, not based on where they are from. I will continue working with all levels of government to keep our communities safe, keep crime down, and put Minneapolis residents first. I plan to meet with Border Czar Tom Homan tomorrow to further discuss next steps, unquote. Now, these were his posts on X. Now, of course, notice here the misdirection. Oh, it's violent criminals. Oh, only real criminal investigations. Well, you don't get to decide that. Because if you do, then the rule of law is not a thing. Apparently, some crimes just don't matter. The question is this: does the sanctuary city policy end? Now, coupled with this is you have these reports, which was celebrated by the media, by The Atlantic, by Gavin Newsom, California governor, who's probably going to be the presidential nominee for the Democrats in 2028, saying Border Patrol Chief Greg Bovino had lost his job. Now, the White House promptly denied this, and then this morning, he popped up in LA already arresting people. So, clearly he has not lost his job, but he's not in Minnesota anymore. Now, what to think about all this? A lot of us seem to almost want President Trump to back down. So you could say, well, look, I told you so. It is a bit early for that, but it is a possibility. What is the victory condition here? What separates Trump backing down from Trump winning? The victory condition is that Minneapolis is no longer a sanctuary city. That if the feds say, we want this migrant, the local PD is going to hand him over, and that's it. And it's very straightforward. It's insane that this is allowed at all. It's nullification, which is something that we thought we settled many centuries ago. Why is it allowed? First, it is rooted in race. Politics, real politics, is identity politics. This is a voting bloc. They operate as a collective. One political faction has a vested interest in having as many of these people here as reliable clients. Jacob Frey, before referring to the many glorious benefits of immigrant communities that he talks about, he would never talk this way about actual Americans. Think of how weird it would be. Think of how alien to your ears if they said, you know, Minnesota has really benefited from the many contributions of white Americans to our state. Nobody would ever talk that way. But we talk about the glorious benefits of immigrant communities. Why? Because there are none. Because they wouldn't talk this way if we all knew what they were. You can never imagine any Republican or Democrat referring to the contributions of the founding stock in this way. Second thing going on is since the 1970s, The violent American left has essentially had a veto over policy. People talk about now, oh, the country is so divided. It's like the Civil War. Get ready, guys. I could give you some clickbait and probably get better things on the algorithm by saying we're on the brink of civil war, but we're not. We had a staggering amount of political violence in the 1970s. I mean, keep in mind what's happening right now, probably the largest single decline in the homicide rate in American history. And a lot of that is just because it's harder to get away with. There's a lot less political violence than there usually is historically. But you have a lot more political divides, a lot more political tensions, and you have a lot more things happening in the political process that previous generations just couldn't have imagined. The idea that illegal immigrants have a right to stay here at all, let alone that they have a kind of privileged position within our political process. And the thing is, leftists have this religious conviction. It's not an exaggeration. It's not a metaphor to say race is at the center of actual American religious belief. That's what the religion is following the Second World War. And when you see these people going out there, willing to die, they're seeking a kind of martyrdom. It's no accident that you have all these supposed clergy out there saying, oh, it's a holy cause to welcome unlimited Muslims into the country. That's what Jesus commands, apparently. And we're not just talking the transgender flag female pastors. We're talking even people who I think most would consider to be real Christian leaders, whether you're part of that denomination or not. So, for example, this is Cardinal Joseph Tobin. This is a close ally of Pope Leo.
How will you say no? How will you say no to violence? Because as the great teacher Martin Luther King said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. How will you say no? In this week when an appropriations bill is going to be considered in Congress, will you contact your congressional representatives, the senators and representative from your district? We ask them for the love of God and the love of human beings, which can't be separated. Vote against renewing funding for such a lawless organization. How will you scrawl your answer on the wall? How will you help restore a culture of life in the midst of death? Thank you. God bless you.
Now again, who does he quote here? Martin Luther King. Another supposed Christian, right? Well, actually, he was a serial adulterer, denied the divinity of Christ. He wrote in a paper entitled The Humanity and Divinity of Jesus that it was actually harmful to impute to Christ a divine nature, which raises the question of what's the point of all this? But that's where this cardinal begins. So what does that tell you about what his actual theological beliefs are? And consider modern America. Like, if you actually believed any of this, like, well, I'm doing this because I so believe in my religion. All right, well, what's America now? Like the state of the culture, the open blasphemy, opposition of modern America to what the Catholic Church taught for generations, endless ranks of Catholic politicians championing abortion and gay marriage and all that. That's not even an issue. That's not even a problem. What's the issue? We need to defund ICE. So really, what does he actually believe in as a matter of his religious faith? And how does this extend to everybody else? Really, what's happening is we just have an NGO, which is all it is, saying we want more money to resettle unlimited brown people. And we're vaguely waving our hands around with some religious aesthetics, because that might trick you into acting against your own interests and in favor of ours. Again, you don't actually have to listen to any of this, but the other side has this moral and spiritual support that you don't. So they got identity politics on their side. They have like a real political base and real political concrete interests, but they also have this moral and religious and spiritual conviction that our side does not. And they believe in what they're doing. James O'Keefe is out there in Minnesota right now. James O'Keefe obviously has exposed a lot of stories over the years. I knew him years ago. I worked with him at the Leadership Institute. We go way back. He's out there right now talking about how sophisticated these efforts are on the left, how organized they are. And he posted the following, and a lot of people are really mad about him. What did he say? He said, quote, "This is a hard pill for most of you to swallow, but these Minnesota agitators possess a fiercer faith in their cause than many Christians show in Christ. A faith proved not by words, but by readiness to act, to sacrifice, to endure. I witnessed it. And then he quotes Whittaker Chambers, their power, whose nature baffles the rest of the world because in a large measure the rest of the world has lost that power, is the power to hold convictions and to act on them. It is the same power that moves mountains. It is also an unfailing power to move men. Communists are that part of mankind which has recovered the power to live or die, to bear witness for its faith. Whittaker Chambers wrote that in Witness, which is one of the great political memoirs of all time. Now, I may get in trouble for this, but I think it's even more than that. It's not that their faith outmatches that of the Christians. It's that many of the supposed Christians have subordinated their faith into this racial egalitarianism. Like, that's their actual religion now. I could go up to that cardinal and blaspheme all I want. I could be like, oh, Jesus wasn't God. Hell, Martin Luther King said the same thing, and he thinks he's great. He'll sit there and take it. But if I support ICE, now he's mad. And if you aren't mad about something, you don't really care about it. But it's not just that the left is more dedicated. It's also that they have this kind of backing. And these aren't two separate things. To really be self-righteous about something, you have to think that you're going to win, either in the short term or in the long view of history. You have to believe you're doing the right thing in the eyes of humanity. That's what gives them courage and this sense of moral righteousness. And weirdly enough, they just assume they're going to win. They're like actors in a play, the ending of which has already been written. Remember, Renee Nicole Good, her wife, that was the first person who was shot by ICE, the partner of the person ICE shot. What did she say after she was shot? Why do you guys have real bullets? That's an insane thing to yell to law enforcement. But they think they're just actors in this Netflix drama where the outcome is predetermined and there's no real danger. David French, former National Review columnist, he's built a career criticizing the right because, Jesus hates Trump and wants unlimited Somalis or something. He wrote some sanctimonious column. I'm not going to even get into it, but there's one line that stuck with me. One of the saddest things about the killings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy is that you could tell neither of them seemed to know the danger until it was too late. He does not mean it this way, but I agree with him. That's the point. These people thought they have like an official role, that they're bulletproof, that you can just go up to law enforcement in dangerous situations and start physically confronting people and getting in their way, pushing an agent in the latter case, and just nothing will happen. I mean, this is just Reddit brain insanity where people are telling each other anecdotes about like denouncing the guy in the MAGA cap at the Starbucks and everybody clapped and he cried and ran away. But this is not TV fantasy hour. This is real life. And they don't seem to understand that there are real consequences and they're putting themselves in danger for the absolute scum of the earth. And I think some of them are willing to some extent to go down with the ship, but it's because they take victory for granted. And because they think any sacrifice will be honored in the long term. It's not even really a sacrifice in that sense. It's modern sainthood and the only religion that people actually believe in today. They assume they're going to win and that their cape shit movies in the future, which is where they get their ideas from, are going to honor them as heroes.
How's this for a motivational phrase? Our resistance will be talked about for generations.
What's with your teeth? Yeah, listen to that. These people vote, man. I'm going to talk to her. So, how do you defeat it? Well, it's a subtle thing. There's nothing to negotiate with. You need to crush these people, but you also don't want to give them the martyrdom they crave. You don't want to give them the media spectacle. In many ways, what you got to do is you got to wage a war of attrition. That's what happened to a lot of radical movements in the 60s and 70s. You turn revolution into routine. You take away the romance of it. You make it not something that demands everything out of somebody, but something that demands long and boring work, which most people don't want to deal with. I mean, they're looking for that high. And you also don't give them the enemy you want. Now, we began talking about Trump talking with Waltz and Frey. Did Trump back down? It's too early to say. Eliminating sanctuary cities and states is the victory condition. And a lot of people are already saying, well, Trump backed down. This is a total defeat. I think it's a little too early for that. Nothing's actually happened yet. We'll see. But here's why I don't think Trump backed down. Because this is what happened last night. In fact, I will go so far as to say that based on what happened last night, it looks like the White House is winning right now. Last night, the Minnesota State Police and local PD were cracking down on the protests. Not ICE, not the feds, the state and local forces. First time that's happened. Last night, The protests were declared an unlawful assembly. Take a look.
You are now under arrest. Please sit down and wait for instruction. Where's your credentials?
I'm at level 12 news.
I can't hear you.
I'm at level 12 news. BG on the scene. I've just pressed.
You don't have any press credentials?
I don't. I can show you.
All right, why don't you move out there, okay?
Oh.
Just get out there. Stay outside the line, okay? Coming out. Coming out.
So you had that. And then you had them actually arresting the protesters who defied the orders.
Stop! No! What is going on? Stop! Hey! Stop! What are y'all doing? Let her go! Let her go! Who are you serving and who are you protecting? I know my fucking rights! I know my rights! I know my rights! What the fuck is y'all doing? I'm an American citizen! I am not! What the fuck are y'all doing? Nobody is resisting y'all bitch asses is just weak! And look at this fat ass still standing there like a piece of shit! Choda ass bitch! Fuck you, bitch! Piece of shit! Freedom of speech, right? Ain't that the law? Ain't that the fucking law? Step on! All citizens have here for now. My phone number is 612-636-59. My dad's number is 612. Hey, I want to speak to Charles Adams. Charles Adams. I want to speak to Charles Adams. I'm my dead homie. Captain of the third precinct. I want to speak to him. What are we doing? My name is Rachel. This is not here for now. Hey, I hope y'all have fun touching me too, y'all gay ass.
And then, after that, you had some people staying in the hotel. Maybe they're ICE guys, maybe they're not. Who knows? I think they probably were ICE guys, but some white guys who were sitting there in comfort, drinking beer, laughing at the protesters, decided to moon them.
Fuck you! They can come the fuck up! Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you! I got that on video.
Now, again, it's early, but when you're drinking beer and laughing and mooning your enemies, you're probably not losing. This does not strike me as a shameful surrender or a humiliating retreat. If anything, I think the people who are going to be going nuts right now are left-wing protesters who should be very angry at Tim Walz and Jacob Frey. Because you can't just compare people to Nazis and the Gestapo and fascists and accuse them of genocide, and then the next day say, well, I had a nice phone call. Well, actually, we all want the same things. And then that night, the armed forces that you actually have control of are cracking your skulls, while the people that you think are the Gestapo are in their hotel drinking beer and laughing at you. That's what just happened. I mean, how else do you explain state and local authorities now guarding ICE, which is what they are doing? If I were a leftist, if I were putting myself in the street getting tear gassed, and I've been tear gassed and it sucks, I'd be really mad about this. But here's the thing. The president is doing the bare minimum here. Like, we're just trying to get rid of the violent criminals, and that's meeting with violent resistance. And you have people on our side, people who stand like the Third Reich and stuff, being like, well, this is going too far. You can criticize the president for a lot, even on immigration, but he's not going too far here. This is the bare minimum of what we have to do. You want to talk about remigration? You want to talk about reconquering America? If this is too much for you, how do you expect to solve this problem? What are you even doing here? And you think like it won't be a big deal if you go after the employers, you debank the illegals, you find the hell out of the companies, you defund the NGOs, including the churches, especially the churches. You do all this kind of quiet stuff. Yeah, you might not get street protests, but the people with money and the people with sympathetic media audiences, they're going to go nuts. There's going to be resistance. This is going to be hard. The time to solve this was 40 years ago, but we didn't, and here we are now. What do you think's going to happen? Like, harden your hearts, people. It comes down to a very simple choice. Do you have the will to get these people out? Or are you going to submit to being ruled by them? Well, I have a third option. I don't consent, and I've got a super special ideology that tells me I don't win. Yeah, you're still paying your taxes. I don't care. There are two choices. There are two sides. Pick one. Do you want these people out or not? And I'm very willing to entertain Trump isn't going far enough. Yeah, I'll listen to that all day. I'll agree with you. But you better have a political force to the right of Trump. And you better have a willingness to use tactics that he won't, in a way it can actually work. Because right now, you're not going to get any credit for whining about ICE from your enemies. They want you dead. For them, politics is religion. For too many of us, it's entertainment, or even worse, a way of making a living. And if it stays that way, it's very easy to predict which side's going to win. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. Now, my guest today is a longtime activist for the cause, Tim Murdock of White Rabbit Radio. He's been generating content for years. He's been generating stuff since like 2009. Anti-racist is a code word for anti-white. You've heard that. He came up with that. Anti-racist Hitler is one of these animations that have been passed around for a long time. He joins us now. Check it out. Well, like I said, Tim is one of the hardest working activists in this cause, and he has put forward a number of concepts that have gone from fringe to mainstream just within the course of his career, which is, of course, the goal for all of us. So before we even begin, I got to say thank you for everything you've done, because in a movement where there are so many fly-by-night people, I mean, you're one of the best, and you've been doing this for a very long time.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Checks in the mail.
Well, some of the how did you get started in this? Because when you started bringing up a lot of these concepts and creating a lot of this content, some of the memes that have been passed around for more than a decade at this point, this was the definition of fringe activism. I mean, nobody knew about this stuff unless you were already in the movement. And frankly, there weren't that many of us.
Yeah, in 1999, I was glossing over various different right-wing characters, and I came across Whitaker, who I had heard of from the particular, he was involved in the forced busing situation. He was in the Reagan administration, everything else. And he had said some things online that caught my attention. So I started reading his particular blog. It was about 98, 99. And then I went back and read his books. He edited New Right Spaces, and he was friends with Sam Francis. He was in that whole entire milieu. And I respected the fact that he knew enough about the elites, knew enough about what to do and what not to do. But he said some things that caught my attention, and I started engaging him further. And that was regarding the Cold War and the rolling out of new technology during the Cold War and how it changed the game regarding fax machines and copying machines, because he was on the front lines for that. And that he was going to use that particular model in the internet to roll out what he defined as meme warfare. That he was going to take a political message. At the time, he started working on something called the mantra, which is where we get white genocide. And the diversity is a code word for white genocide, and anti-race is a code word for anti-white. It all comes out of this 200 plus word mantra. And he was at a couple thousand words, and then he starts baking it down from 2,000 words to trying to get it down to around 200. It was like 222 or something like that by the time he finished. But that's what he did for political messaging during the Cold War and during the Reagan administration, whatever. He would start with a concept, a very broad concept, and start baking it down into messages, what we would later know as memes. And at the time, I thought it was fairly aggressive, but his concept was that if they won't listen to us, I'm sitting on Stormfront every day, like this is him talking. I'm sitting on Stormfront every day. I'm a former Reagan administration appointee. I mean, that's kind of a story.
Yeah, I mean, he came out of the mainstream. He came out of the conservative movement. I mean,
It's a story, and I'm talking about white genocide, but they won't cover it, and they won't cover it because they're not going to give us any press. They want to talk about all this fluff issues, or they want to chase around some kind of cartoon character or something like that. He's like, so you're going to have to be aggressive to drive the message. In this new form of communication, it's going to allow that. He believed, and he was right. And at the time, based on where I was at in my life, I couldn't really help him that much. But there came a time around 2005, 2006 that I was dealing with a terminal illness in the family. And so I had free time. And so I started messing around with him. And there was no more than half dozen of us online testing out his 220 some word mantra. And it would just blow up comment sections. It would just absolutely blow it up. It was long enough for them to read it, but not short enough for them to skip it.
Right.
And at that time, we started gathering a group together. And by 2009, he was somewhat frustrated. And he's like, you need to do it a podcast, but the podcast is going to be samizdat. Samizdat is, the term from the Soviet meaning anonymous
stuff. Yeah.
And we're going to have an anonymous podcast and you're going to be on it. And no one's going to know who you are. It's just going to be a half dozen of these podcasts. And we're going to put it out there and we're going to get a larger group together. We'll see if it works. Just do a half dozen of these podcasts. Just do something you think is going to work because all this other stuff, it's not doing what I want. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. You're not going to like it. He's like, doesn't matter. I'm not even going to listen to it. He says, I just want it to work. And so I put it out and it absolutely blew up. And then this group started growing and growing. And we would take over comment sections on CNN. An immigration piece would come out and we would just blow it up. And sooner or later, internet stats at the time and still are a lot of voodoo. But he has like a hallmark standard. And his hallmark standard was very simple. We're going to impose terminology because in one fell swoop, it allows us to impose ideology. And just give me the headlines. I don't give a shit about anything else. Just give me the headlines. Put anti-white in the headlines. We put anti-white in the headlines because anti-white was 100 years old, according to him. And it had last been used in the 60s by the New York Times. But he wanted it used again because we want to divide the social space once, not between racist and anti-racist, but between pro-white and anti-white.
Anti-white.
And that was his objective. We have to redivide the social space because in war, there can only be one division in the social space. If you're going to war against China, you're not going to have basic training and saying, well, we're technically at war with these elites in Shanghai. No, you're at war against China. You got to define the social space in basic training. And that's what he would basically always say. But anyways, he said, if we can do headlines there, we can do headlines with white genocide because this word is already out there in the memory of Americans somewhere.
Right.
And sooner or later, it started creeping into the headlines. By 2011, that's when I basically gave the first speech. It would have been Stormfront's conference on practical politics. Our group was bursting out over 300 people posting and reporting online, trying to drive out. The onslaught basically was ready to occur for a white genocide. And he announced at the Stormfront conference that what meme wars had begun and our side was going to dominate, absolute dominate space and time. And everyone looked at him like he was crazy. Including
it's
me.
incredible.
Like, well,
right. Yeah.
The model works. You knew what you were doing with that. I mean, he saw this on the front lines with fax machines in the Cold War and how it changed the game. A small group of a dozen or a half dozen could absolutely obliterate much larger groups, right? During the Cold War, simply because of access to technology. They didn't have to put stamps on envelopes. They could just rifle out talking points. And so what he's doing is running the same model, and he has an edge over most other people. He has a model, and he knows what he's doing, and he knows that the message is right. It's true. It's aggressive, but the medium, you were dealing with the new form of communication, which, and to quote him explicitly, is the most aggressive form of human communication ever invented, and he's going to put out the most aggressive message. He's accusing the enemy of a criminal accusation without statute of limitations. There's no statute of limitations on genocide, and he wants it out there. So I figured there was no harm, no foul in helping the guy. And it did blow up, and it's went on from there. This was before the alt-right. The rise of the alt-right would be the reign supreme of meme culture. And then you have the aftermath, which we're still in, and the mainstreaming of our ideals without the actions we would necessarily take. Right. This kind of endless loop that they're trying to put us in, which seems to be more aggravation for the base than anything else. Meaning that's our people.
Right. It's a very difficult situation we're in because for so long, I think so many of us thought perhaps naively, that if we can just get the message out there, that that's a victory in itself, because we were so used to being censored and so used to our ideas not being able to be in the mainstream, that if we could just get them into the mainstream, by definition, we win. But it's not the same thing to have your ideas in the mainstream or even to win an election and to meaningfully exercise political power, or that like you are in power. But clearly, if you look at the mantra and if you look at really the beginnings of the meme wars, which is what you're talking about, I mean, this goes back, I think, a lot farther than a lot of people remember. Because for a lot of people, they think this all just kind of started with the first Trump campaign. But I remember this was going on for a very long time. And John Derbyshire, of all people, writing long ago, if there is hope, it is in the comments sections. Because in the comments sections, you would always see these right-wing talking points, including, of course, the mantra. And of course, what ended up happening is a lot of these mainstream media newspapers just got rid of their comment sections because they could no longer control it.
Yeah, we saw that happen. That is for sure. I mean, the animations, I'm most probably famous for animations like How Whites Took Over America. Some people like Johnny Racist, but we're still kind of messing with that one. I mean, Anti-Racist Hitler, the famous one from 2013. And so that kind of, in my mind, those are kind of acceleration points for me as far as meme wars go. On our side, like the team behind those particular animations, were just trying to push the ball as hard as we could, as fast as we could against an enemy. Before they could, we assumed that they would take more aggressive measures online, which they've never really been able to do in a sustained fashion. I mean, I've been banned everywhere, but I'm still there.
Right. I mean, you're on X, though. I mean, it's also...
I've been banned there several times and got the account back.
I mean, under the new regime, I mean, of course, this is maybe one of the things that we're so reliant on is we have a certain amount of elite defection on this issue. I think Elon Musk buying X changed everything. And of course, he had to go through with it. I mean, he tried to back out of that deal. And essentially, in a kind of an amazing own goal, there was this judge in Delaware which forced him to go through with the deal, forced him to overpay for this thing. And now, of course, he's there. And he's probably the single most influential figure when it comes to signal boosting, these ideas of white genocide or the ideas that white people are being attacked. But of course, President Trump has to be up there too. I mean, it was just a couple days ago where he was at some international summit and he said white genocide is happening in South Africa. I mean, could you have imagined that we would get to this point?
Well, when Whitaker was alive, he looks for something, his gold standard again was headlines and is something going top down. Forget about the voodoo and the statistics. If you can take a message from the bottom, a small group, and have someone mention it anywhere in a speech at the top or something in and around a speech at the top, not just headlines, but you're officially top down. That means somewhere between 7 and 11% of the population understand on a subconscious level or a visceral level the particular concept. And so when Hillary Clinton mentioned white genocide, her speechwriter put that in. That was officially an objective measure for him to say we're top down. We have somewhere around, again, you could say 10%. We have the magic number, and this will all be mainstream all over it's done. It's cooked. Now we just have to prepare for the end. You know, he would say, if you're taking over the world, someone's going to notice and they're not going to be happy. Now, in our particular case, we had these people join our side, and it's kind of like what to make of them. Elon is autistic enough. He's autistic enough and has enough white kids to be concerned. But it's almost like guys like to meet us halfway and then take it into a brick wall, into another particular dimension or onto a path that we would not normally take it onto. Our messaging. That is a challenge for us. Also, the action they're taking now is not. They've basically, Trump has squandered a year. Some would say that they're ramping up and they're dealing with all these internal problems. I don't know. I mean, Blackwater, the founder of Blackwater, said they could do $500,000 a month in deportation. Yeah. So that would be 6 million. Now, white papers, I had white papers on 6 months or 8 months prior to that. And white papers said by their own research, they should do $500,000 a month. So I think that's a good number. We've got 2 independent sources saying, well, I could do $500,000 a month. So he should already have 6 million out of the country, somewhere in that number. Then you'd have, because he does objectively have the borders closed, right?
Yes.
But the neocons have long talked about, I talked about this in the last couple of weeks, Krauthammer, I played the clip from him. The neocons have long worried about the sovereignty, and namely their sovereignty. And the sovereignty goes with the borders. So, that could be a negotiated point that they said, well, we're going to close the borders. We just don't want to let that many immigrants go and so on and so forth. Because there's more than enough non-Europeans in Western civilization to change it forever.
Right.
What we need is deportations, obviously, and that's not occurring. Now, you can go into different reasons for that. But again, they've squandered opportunity. Or some would say that the system is so backed up that they can't get anything going. But nonetheless, when they do get something going, they're rolling in the snow with liberals in Minnesota when they could be running around red states making hay, deporting people.
Well, to some extent, I mean, if you look at the deportations out of the red states, they are getting more out of the red states. It's because in those states they can work with state and local law 100%. Enforcement, so you don't have to roll around the snow. So they are doing that. It's just there's no headlines there.
I would have liked to seen them concentrate entirely on that,
entirely on the red states,
and then move
just to get
into
the
the
numbers
blue
up.
state once you have insane numbers coming out and people are on your side.
Right.
And then I would start counter messaging, because the big messaging that's being countered in the Trump administration, the message they're having to encounter is from small and medium business owners. And those small and medium business owners, who's going to run my hotel? Who's going to clean my toilets? You have this going on with these quote unquote illegal laborers. And I would counter that with the BlackRock CEO saying, well, the countries that are going to dominate are going to be smaller countries that use a lot of AI and use a lot of robotics. I would then counter that with, as well as Musk saying, we're going to be rolling out robotics by the end of 2026. I would then have some type of rebate program or some type of tax incentive to try to start immediately shifting all these particular labor pools into some type of automated workforce, or at least some type of tax incentive to help them along the way to shut them up. And I would have a counter message as well as some type of counter program to hammer them, to keep them in place. Why I started massive deportations. And because sooner or later, you're going to have people out of the country. You're going to have massive automation. Look at China and the black factories, the dark factories, and all the robots they're rolling out like they are in Japan. China's really supposedly ahead of the curve on this because they have a rapidly shrinking workforce. Eventually, you're going to be in that self-reinforcing loop where you have, a high-tech white population growing with all these high-tech jobs that you're going to have to fix robots, you're going to have to run them, and you're going to need all these businesses are going to want those to replace their illegals, but you've got to get into that self-reinforcing loop. You've got to get it started. So you're going to have to do incentives, a variety of different incentives, and you're going to have to really hammer a message. And I would use right-wing message around the right wing, but I would also use these business elites and what they're saying, and I would use it against them for HBs and everything else.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it an elite defection, but it was definitely surprising to a lot of people when Larry Fink, I think was the BlackRock CEO, who
made that statement.
Immigration. What's that?
He made that statement.
Yeah. And I think that for so many people, it was just taken as a matter of dogma that the people like this are the ones pushing cheap labor. And it was a real shock when he comes along and says, basically, there's no economic rationale for mass immigration anymore. What's really surprising, I think, is Elon Musk, who, again, openly talks about these ideas of white genocide and anti-white discrimination, things that we would have been thrilled with getting this kind of exposure 15 years ago. But at the same time, he's one of the more insistent voices for we still need more H-1B. We still need more of these people.
The lukewarm stuff that I don't trust. They'll meet us halfway, then run us into a brick wall. Again, we need action, and you need to get in a self-reinforcing loop, and you need to be able to hold them hostage to something along the way, because once you get into that self-reinforcing loop, the elites are not going to want to go back, because they're going to actually you're going to make more money off an all-white workforce and robotics.
Right. I mean, it's the funny thing. That's the tragedy of this whole thing.
The problem is that the neocons and that particular Jewish milieu, they want white genocide. They want this blended humanity, and they want to be able to hold this particular, we're just going to get over this Rubicon. We have closed borders, and then we're going to, over a course of time, they'll just be blended enough. They're going into that particular phase, is my opinion. It's what they want. Don't think they're going to get it. But nonetheless, it's you're not going to be able to meet us halfway and not have any action. The problem that they're going to get into is that you're going to encounter third world conditions and you're not going to be making money in third world conditions. Or you're going to, I should say, you can make money, but the aggravation is going to be so high.
Yeah, one of the things that I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, Lenin talked during the Russian Revolution about how you can get the capitalists to sell you the rope on Friday, have the revolution Saturday, hang them on a Sunday. Saul Alinsky said the same thing. Saul Alinsky, we know, said that. Lenin supposedly said it. You see what's happening in New York City. You see the rise of overt socialism, and it's a socialism that is explicitly anti-white, where they talk about how we're going to have government policies designed to punish white people. We're going to punish this wealth disparity. We're going to get rid of these things. And
South
yet,
Africa.
Yeah. And we all know how South Africa ended. Like, there's no mystery about how gay race communism ends in terms of, even if you believe in free market economics and that's your top thing, like, there's no happy ending here. And yet, even now, you still have people within the GOP, these business lobbyists, basically saying, well, we need to have amnesty. Well, we need to back off deportations. Well, are you surprised at how they just refuse to learn this, even though these sorts of messages have penetrated the mainstream? Because if you look at the people can say what they want about Trump, but if you look at the congressional GOP and the average staffers at like a conservative institution, it seems like they're still trapped in 1985.
Yeah, they're going to get their heads knocked off. I just don't know how it's going to happen. This is why I would have stayed out of the blue states, where you're going to, because you're going to have these incidents we're seeing if you're going to deport a lot of people. I would keep it really isolated to areas I could control until you can really get into that self-reinforcing process. But of course, you could make an argument. A lot of white nationalists make the argument that this is what they want the whole time. They just want to get it stuck and just like,
strategy of tension.
Right. You got to do some amnesty, because all these other elements, like you mentioned, they are either clueless, evil, on the take, or they're part of the neocon agenda.
How would you characterize what Donald Trump has meant to your messaging effort? Because clearly that seems to be the key accelerant that took these sorts of ideas from the fringe into the mainstream. Perhaps not something that he intended. Perhaps it was completely unintentional, maybe even regret sometimes. But it's hard to argue that we'd be where we are if it were not for Donald Trump coming down that escalator.
I mean, it's impossible to know, because we can't replay things with someone else in charge. I will say this, though. When I first got started, it was under Obama. And I always say white nationalists meeting Obama was like Silicon Valley meeting Wall Street for the first time. It was explosive, because you had his Justice Department run by Eric Holder, and he wanted to like force integrate white areas. It was just beautiful. There was nothing better than to kick off a podcast to. It was just so explosive. So you could go one direction or another. I think Trump, in many ways, with his, for instance, like the fumbling in Minneapolis and stuff like that, he either, you could say he's evil, he's blackmailed. I don't know, but he doesn't seem to, at best, he doesn't seem to know what to do with what he has, because he could go a lot further. He could go a lot faster. He definitely has this term over the first term, but he didn't the first term. He could have done all this in his first term.
Well, certainly even the first term, you didn't get the shutdown of the border. I mean, obviously the numbers came way down, but you didn't get like the total shutdown of the border that you got in this term, which seemed to have happened basically within the first week, which of course just kills the talking point that we've heard our entire lives, that you need to have amnesty in order to shut down the border. It turns out that was a complete lie. Not that we didn't know that, but Trump has proved that. That's like the one thing you could say where he just solved the problem and it's done. Considering what's happening in Minneapolis, I think the strategy there is they're going after, because they're not going after the workers. Trump said just a couple days ago, oh, we're not going to deport the people who are working in hotels and farms because they're good people and all this kind of stuff. He doesn't want that fight with the business community that wants cheap labor. Instead, he's trying to deport the criminals, and he's facing this kind of resistance even in the deep blue cities. Is it therefore, given that at this point you can't really back down without looking weak, What do you think the Trump administration should do in terms of a pivot? Does it just need to see this through and then declare victory and leave and focus on the red states? Or now that you're in this, do you force more confrontations with sanctuary cities and try to break that policy once and for all?
Oh, I would go back into red states. I would do some kind of a gimmick and declare victory or whatever and just back off, because you're dealing with a place that it appears the neocons have it in for the Muslims. So, I mean, they're targeting Somalis for some particular reason. Israel has a deal with Somaliland, and I'm always buying into conspiracies. So I don't believe in coincidences in all this. I mean, there's Somalis. Yeah, they're a problem, but there's other problems. Kind of like, we've got H-1B problems. We have legal immigration problems. But nonetheless, I would reconcentrate on the red states. I would take the easy money off the table. I would bring up deportations to enormous numbers consistently. And I mean, the blue states, the New Yorks, the Minnesotas, the Californias, I would just almost blockade them for a period of time. Let all the illegals that want to flee there. And then, of course, eventually you're going to have to deal with that. Now, what we may be dealing with, the best case scenario for us would be some type of a civil war between the neocons and their more liberal cousins, where there's a showdown. The neocons, Krauthammer always talked about he got concerned with borders, meaning the neocons were concerned with open borders, because that comes down to sovereignty, as in their sovereignty, not necessarily our sovereignty, but sovereignty and what's best for Israel and so on and so forth. And there may be a showdown in some of these areas between some of these different factions, between like the more neocons and the more Pritzkers. That would be your best case scenario. And there can be big showdowns between these groups historically, when these very powerful factions of Jewish elites go at it. That would be your best case scenario. I just don't know what the odds of that are. But letting them sit up and run this particular game and falling into this particular game that they can win, because you're going to look like the aggressor. You've got these white liberals and you're shooting, guns are going off and everything else. Yeah, they're in the way. You have these governors and these particular liberal messaging outlets that are treating ICE officers who are actually federal badges, like Trump's rent-a-cops. Well, they're not Trump's rent-a-cops. Rent-a-cops don't have federal badges or federal immunity. These guys actually have immunity because they're in the middle of an operation. It'd be like, pulling up in your car, recording a TikTok video, blowing a whistle at the local FBI raid. That's not going to go very well for anyone. No. But at the same time, they have enough messaging control and they have enough basics on their side. And one basic they have on their side is that if you have a particular consistent message going on in a society for any length of time, 15 to 20 years is the length of time you need, a percentage of that society is going to be baked forever on that message. This is the tragedy. So the reason I would hold off is because I know that a good percentage of them are baked for life until you can counter that message in a very broad way in their own circles for 15 to 20 years. Well, you want to take the easy money off the table. You're going to be in a fight. They're going to think they're fighting Hitler. They're going to think, I mean, again, that's what they think. And so you just want to stay the hell away from it as best you can. You might want to hit on the end, in and around the periphery, but I wouldn't sit in there for some kind of big fight with them, because it'll be a fight.
So you think it's really just a question of tactics where the Trump administration has screwed up this term in picking a fight that I guess they weren't ready for. I mean, maybe they just didn't anticipate this level of resistance in something like Minneapolis.
Well, actually, maybe they did.
Criminals, or maybe they did.
Maybe
like the
strategy
and tension, like we're trying to like actually pick the fight and have the showdown.
Maybe the neocons did. I'll be looking to Stephen Miller to see what he does, because Stephen Miller, of course, is the very clever one. If they intentionally did this, or if it's like, why are you doing this stupid shit? We're looking. I'm going to look toward the Jews to see what the neocons really are trying to do, and why they would. Maybe Kristi Noem's just dumb. Maybe Bavino wants to walk around in the trench coat and act like he's pushing around cities. But there obviously is a lot of criminal elements in these illegals, whether it be the Mexicans, probably in LA, as well as the Somalis. Apparently, have gone gangbusters in various different illegal activities. So there's ways for them to win points, but you just need to really, they need to either with the Army, with Blackwater, and whatever Blackwater's calling themselves now, you need to ramp up those deportations. You need to get as much of your base on your side to where you have this showdown, you stomp it out and win. You can't serve injury. If you're running a corporation, let's say you take over a corporation, me and you take over a corporation, very large corporation, the corporation is in trouble, we have to lay off 20%. The last thing we want to do is sit there and lay off 0.5% every day. Or
right.
You want to serve injury as fast as possible.
Right.
You want to then walk in. This is how they need to do that on an area by area basis. And they need to start in the red states where they can control message 24/7 and and rally things on their side. They need to counter the businesses that are going to be crying with, again, incentives.
That'll be the big problem in the red states, is dealing with those guys, congressmen like Don Bacon and people like that who are already complaining that too much is being done. I mean, you're still going to have to deal with those guys. But I think if Trump has done anything, it's shown that he can bend the GOP to his will.
He can. There's a lot he can do. He might not be getting good advice, and the advice he might be getting, who knows? I don't know what his end game objective is, because there's part of our side can make very articulate arguments that his objective is not to do anything. and just like play these particular games. It's like worldwide wrestling, the red team versus the blue team in Minneapolis. And that can get very dangerous very quickly, especially with the libtards, because they're going to treat it like not red team versus blue team. They're going to treat it like World War II and we're fighting Hitler.
It's the Eastern Front, yeah.
And they're going to treat it like Stalingrad or something.
Right. Well, this, I guess, is the broader point where there was a time, and again, we've been in this for a comparable amount of time. I've been writing since about the time you started. Early on, it sort of felt like you were shouting into the void. And sometimes you'd be doing these things and you could talk about radical ideas and you could theory craft and do these sort of elaborate castles in the sky, because there didn't seem to be any real consequences. We didn't have a voice in government. People weren't getting elected. These ideas were confined to a small circle. Now we're in this, and we're constantly accused of, people will say, like, the Trump administration is a white nationalist administration. Okay, it's not, obviously. But people are reading this kind of stuff. They're talking about these ideas. And the left has now defined itself, I think, purely on the basis of being anti-white. That's what it is to be a leftist now.
Yeah.
I think they've abandoned economics altogether, more or less.
This is good, though.
This is very good, because this is exactly what you were setting out as an objective. What is the social divide? This is exactly what you wanted. The question becomes, I understand the theory and the argument for we can't be co-opted by the American right. We can't just be like militant shock troops for the Republican Party. Everyone agrees with that. But at the same time, if the Democrats take over, if the left takes over, we just lose. Like, we don't get a special prize for not falling for it, so to speak. We just pay our taxes and get ruled by our enemies, and we just lose. So what is the way forward?
I don't know.
Yeah. There's not really a simple answer, but that's sort of the dilemma. I don't know a way forward
without a flashpoint. Our objective is to saturate. We're in saturation, and we want as many people saturated into our message that are healthy and white as possible.
Right.
Because what we're seeing is that you can take over a city with some federal government, but that doesn't mean you've taken over anything. Doesn't mean anything. We're at the point where the left is playing a game like, we don't care what you say, we don't believe it, we don't care about your laws, we're not going to follow it. Right. Well, two can play that game as well.
Right.
And just get this game over with and split up the country or whatever. We're going for white survival. We're not necessarily going for, I don't know how it's going to happen. We just have to keep pushing forward. That's all that's my philosophy. And we'll have breaks in our favor. I just can't predict them. But the last thing I want to do, the last group I want to fight are white, anti-white, non-Jews. And the reason for that is because the anti-white Jews, they're going to be duplicitous. They're going to play games. They might in the end be anti-white, but they're going to say, these guys have a point. because if it wasn't for the 65 Immigration Act, Zionists are saying this every day. Jewish Zionists are saying this every single day on X, almost. If it wasn't for the 65 Immigration Act, if Stephen Miller would have been running things right then, well, Israel would be in a different spot. And that's 100% true, because me and you wouldn't be having this conversation. We'd be in a 90% white country. We wouldn't even know who they are, really. Just some funny little dudes in funny little caps running around the Middle East. But the fact of the matter is they did that. And so you have the 65 Immigration Act and you have the current dynamic. The last thing you want to do is you want to fight the white, anti-white liberals first on. You want to weed them down and isolate them and keep hitting them with message and counteracting the message that flipped liberals to begin with, like Jarrett Taylor. You want to be hitting them from all sides along the way to weed down their numbers into just the Trantifa radicals that can be easily done away with. The last thing you want to do, the reason for this is religion to them. You're dealing with religious fanatics. And so you're going to end up with scenarios, very dangerous scenarios like you would with any other group of religious fanatics, right? So you want to isolate them and keep wearing them down with messaging, healthy, normal, white messaging, and let the liberals break out. Because if you just want, worried about your Social Security or worried about jobs, there are legitimate liberal concerns, white liberal concerns.
Right.
On the other hand, if you're interested in like wiping out all white kids or turning them all the boys into girls, those are people that can't be dealt with, obviously. But you counteract everything with message, whether it be the business elites, you just cripple them. You cripple them, you take away their children, you do it on message. You do it the same way it was done to us. The last thing you want to do is get into fights with religious fanatics that are unnecessary up front. You want to weed down take the easy money off the table. I mean, there's 60 million illegals. How many of them are white?
Right.
Take the easy money off the table and just, the big war is on legal immigration and H-1Bs now. Everyone 100%. Agrees there's too many illegals. We have Democratic Senator, what's his name? Furman, or the one that had this quote. Fetterman's talking about illegals every day. He's talking about criminals, but everyone concedes the point. The neocons are conceding the point on sovereignty. They've closed the borders as best we can tell. So, and now it's their sovereignty, not ours. But again, we're moving in a particular direction. The last thing you want is some showdown off the top with white fanatic liberals that you can put massive numbers on the same page overnight, thinking they're fighting in Stalingrad. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Don't give them the fight that they've asked for, basically.
Don't, because this is what they want. Mm-hmm. They cannot fight a meme war. They cannot fight a sustained meme war. We know that for a fact. They cannot fight based on, look, all of the problems are tied to legal and illegal immigration, whether it be housing prices or anything else. So you start 100%. Taking the starch out of that, they're going to immediately start saying, okay, we have our local liberal mayor. Everything's fine. Okay, there's not a bunch of Somali illegals, but they were looting welfare anyways. You're going to have liberals arguing with themselves on any given day once things get better. But you've got to get to that point, and it is a concerted effort. And you got to want to get to that point. Because again, you pointed out the various different elements of the Republican Party that don't want to be at that point. Maybe it's because they're blackmailed. I don't trust any of them right now. A
lot of them are just making money from it too. I mean, a lot of it is just that simple. Because the problem, of course, with and I'm sure Whitaker talked about this too. I mean, the problem with the conservative coalition, especially because it came out of the Cold War, is when your highest value is making money and individual gain. Well, you're not going to have people involved in your political movement that are willing to sacrifice or certainly willing to show any kind of solidarity with the nation. And so a lot of these guys, this is the fundamental difference in seriousness between the right and left. So many people on the right, they go into this because it's a way of making a living, and they do their talking points for a couple of years, and then they become like corporate lobbyists and just move away from all the bad consequences. Whereas on the left, as you point out, I mean, these people are religious fanatics, and to some extent, the side with the greater moral willpower is always going to win. How do we overcome that distinction in dedication, willingness to fight?
Well, I think eventually our numbers will be at those levels. What they do have is they have a lot. I mean, let me give you an example. You'll see this type of optics over and over again on the left. You'll have a few Trantifa or anti-ICE guys out with full-on thousands of dollars kitted out in some type of tactical gear on the street corners. Now, we all know if they were just basic boomer Republicans, all hell would break loose.
Oh, yeah. They'd be shot instantly.
So this is what you're dealing with. And you counter it by beefing up your own. It's that simple. I mean, I think there is enough tension in the social space that if Kamala Harris would have got in, I wasn't like someone terribly worried over that. If she got in, not that I wanted to see a black woman president, but if she got in, I was not really worried because I figured we would be in situations like we're in Minneapolis, but from the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
There would be that kind of resistance. And it would be amped up overnight because white people seem to be visual. For whatever reason, they just don't get things until it's bearing down on top of them. You look at the reaction to these Indians online, Ramaswamy in Ohio, who I hope he loses. Hopefully
he seems to be doing a good job of taking care of that himself.
Yeah, but you know, just exposing to what these say, and whether they be the right or left or whatever. I mean, we've got to get over these distinctions. Obviously, there's elements on the Democrats that are dangerous and elements on the Republicans that are useless. But you know, stupid party and the evil party, is that the famous quote?
Yeah, that was St. Francis's time.
But
when they do something together that's stupid and evil, it's
we have to look at the world through pro-white versus anti-white. Who's going to go the distance on one side? But a lot of these anti-white elements in the liberal side, kind of trendy paycheck anti-whites. I'm talking about the white anti-whites. I mean, how committed are they in an all-white neighborhood? You know?
Right. Yeah, there isn't. I always think of it as that's sort of the price they pay. The trendy activism is sort of the thing that you do so you can allow yourself to live in an all-white neighborhood. It's sort of like
it's really demented.
It's like the billionaire who gives some money to the poor, and then it's like, okay, now I'm allowed to be rich. And this is sort of the same thing. Like you live in an all-white neighborhood, but you mount the slogans about anti-racism. You bend the knee for Black Lives Matter, and then you go home to your expensive house and eat the $50 sandwich and the $20 cappuccino in the trendy upscale neighborhood because you've done your bit and you're a good person, and so you're allowed to enjoy these things. I think they think of these things as part of that. It's not just fashion. It's not that they don't believe it, but it's what allows them to live the lifestyle that, in theory, they don't think anybody should be allowed to have.
Yeah, there's a lot of psychological issues going on among whites all over Western civilization. When you get into Australia, these are comments I get and questions. When you get into Europe, the white liberal mindset will be studied for a long, long time.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it is.
And it's interesting, too, how even white liberals, maybe even especially white liberals, how quickly they sound like race realists in certain contexts. Like how quickly they'll go to arguments about IQ, or they'll say things like, well, you would never say that to a black person because he would just attack you. And it's like, really? Well, what are you suggesting here? You know, like they always go with this sort of thing. And yet, Ken, you brought up Jared Taylor before. Jared Taylor was famously a liberal for most of his youth, and then he was kind of won over. He does seem to be something of the exception, though. Can many of these people really be won over through sustained messaging? Or is it true that most people, you know, whatever they believe at 25, that's basically what they're going to believe for the rest of their lives? I mean, certainly look at a lot of these boomer liberals who grew up basically in a 90% white America and are spending their final years fighting to make sure we never get back to that.
I think a percentage of them will be gone, but I don't think it's the biggest percentage that people think. I think it can be countered. I think we're underestimating the strength of media and brainwashing. And I think as this stuff wears on, you're going to break more and more free because, I mean, if you're in an all-white neighborhood that's affluent and you're going to your good job, whatever, it's one thing. But if you're having to see your kids go to school with Somalis, I mean, the whole entire thing just starts changing eventually, piece by piece. But again, I would wait and fight that religious element last when I had the numbers on them. How many are Trantifa? How many are going to go down this angle? How many are going to try to shoot Charlie Kirk? How many? I would want some serious data on these people. And how many are just going to sit in their house? Because I don't care if you're protesting, like, making TikTok videos. That's not a threat, actually. You're worried about who's really going to go the distance. Who's going to start operating some type of crazy communist cell with funding out of South America or something, or funding out of who knows where. That's what you want. But that's a final showdown. You have a lot to do ahead of time.
Right.
So no, I wouldn't have messed with Los Angeles per se. I would take the easy money off the table, and I would keep on taking it off the table. And again, your biggest challenge is going to be countering the business elite, and that can be done with message. It can be done with incentives and tax incentives, and just sitting down in groups and saying, this is how it's going to be. And you're going to be a lot wealthier if we get over to here and sell them on it. And you might have to get rough with them. I don't know. I'm sure most of them are blackmailed somehow.
Well, I think if there's one, the capitalist class has never been noted for its courage. I mean, there's that old saying, an investing capital is a coward. And so it's always going to flee to safety. So if you impose different incentives, generally speaking, the business community is going to follow the incentives. They're not going to try to fight you on this. I think that's
you got to be as honest as possible. Like, look, we're rolling this back, because if the countries, and again, a lot of them are concerned because it's been so played up in the media, fear of China. And you can just simply give them the facts. If we don't go down this road, we're not going to be able to compete with China, because China's not importing 68 IQ Somalis, which is kind of wonderful that this is now a mainstream headline, 60 IQ Somali, 68 IQ Somali. They're basically creating robotics, and you can even put out small propaganda videos on why China is going to get ahead with their dark factories and their completely automated shipping ports, while we're importing brownoid slaves. It just doesn't make sense.
Especially once we have AI and there's not going to be jobs for any of these people.
Yeah, any businessman that says, okay, you're giving me an incentive now, you're giving me rebates, and I'm going down this road, but you're incentivizing that road and you're making sense, you've got to sell them on a picture in the end that his life is going to be a lot easier, because, this $30,000 robot you're going to buy from Elon, you don't have to feed it. You don't have to do much except maintain it. And you don't have to worry about Jose and Social Security and running off or raping and killing your daughter or whatever else. So there's a lot of selling points there, but they're not doing that.
No, that's a good point. I mean, the confrontation with the business community, which is inevitable, and it doesn't even have to be confrontational, as you point out. I mean, there is a give and take here that you do not have with the religious liberals. I mean, at some point there, you're just going to have an existential conflict. But if you're dealing with the Chamber of Commerce, I mean, it's just business, right? It's a negotiation. And
Homeland Security runs one of the most impressive alt-right Twitter meme pages I've ever seen. I'm rather impressed by it. So, I mean, what you would see from Tim Murdock or anyone serious is you would see Chamber of Commerce putting that out. You would see everything aligned, and you would see an onslaught of messaging, the likes of which that would just be it would just be crippling for anyone in doubt. And this is the direction we need to go. And then you're going to have to see massive action. Once it gets self-reinforcing, the only thing left are going to be the religious nuts. And I just don't think they're as numerous as people think.
Yeah, and we can just overwhelm them with numbers. So, DHS, if you're watching this, listen to this.
What are some of the core if you want to act?
What are some of the core rules of messaging that have served you well? Because looking back on it, you've got to say, if your goal was to divide society into the social space of pro-white and anti-white, obviously there's more work to do, but to some extent, you've done it. I mean, this was not the way the social space was 20 years ago. Now it is. I would argue this basically defines the two sides in American politics today. So these rules that you got from Whitaker and that you've developed on your own have been working. What would you say are the core lessons that people need to learn from your experience? Because for a lot of younger viewers, they may be completely unaware of the mantra and all this history.
First off, a lot of younger viewers, because of social media, because of TikTok, because the shorter video range, have shorter attention spans. And they like to move on from one topic to another. But we're still on the same topic 20 years later, white survival. Right. And the tactics we're using are by and large the same. The first rule is always impose terminology. The art of political warfare is imposing terminology. Because if you impose terminology, you've imposed your ideology in one fell swoop. And you have to have unique terminology. It has to be for the times. And it has to be at the 8th grade level. And this is the killer. Someone might argue the 6th grade level, but one of the problems for the very smart people, like many of the viewers, is they tend to have the messaging at the college level. And so you tend to have all the right-wing readers, the big brain readers at the college level. That's fine.
That's a problem. Yeah.
That's fine. Whitaker was a PhD candidate in economics, I think from UVA. So his biggest problem was how to write at the 8th grade level to grind it, because that's where the grind happens. That's where the liberals, you wouldn't have a 20th century without the words racist and anti-Semite.
Yeah, exactly.
And someone had to grind that in. They didn't win debates, by the way.
No.
If you look at North America, and I've seen firsthand, you will rarely find, and I'm talking all of North America, I'm talking Canada, I'm talking America, you can even go into Mexican universities. The left would win debates throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And you can't really find where they would necessarily win a debate. They just would always go to impose terminology over and over again and grind it. Now, their terminology is generally, it's not true. If our race were actually ethnocentric and racist, we wouldn't have a border. We wouldn't have a border issue, but no one would want to be around us. They'd be scared to death of us.
Right now. If any of the things they said about us were true, we would live in paradise.
Exactly. But nonetheless, they were able to do this. They were able to impose their ideology by imposing terminology. That's what we were doing. We don't have a choice because we come under a subversive element that has already subverted society. So you have to take it back. But you have to always think of baking it down to an 8th grade level or less, baking it down to its simplest point. That's all meme is, a minimal unit. Minimal unit of meaning, and then just absolutely hit the broken record until you're coming to power everywhere. Forget about getting everything perfect. Just keep moving the ball on them over and over again. We have truth on our side. We've always had the truth on our side. That's why we never lose debates historically. But that's not winning, unfortunately, against this enemy. Because the enemy has no interest in truth. It has an interest in power. And power has no end game. So keep that in mind. You got to constantly move it. And it's all, messaging is so important. Even in a totalitarian society, messaging is everything. A lot of them, those societies come down because they're contradictions in their messaging. But that's the problem for the right wing now, is you have the messaging that's amplified and mainstream. You just don't have the action. And maybe you don't have the elements with the will to take the action or the brains to take the right action. And you have this nefarious element that we never really know what they're doing other than trying to do something good for Israel that never seems to work out right for them historically. So it's...
In terms of what people can do to start getting involved in this, because you brought up when this started with the mantra, I mean, it was 6 people. And that started with, and it started with these comment sections. I remember seeing it, like seeing the mantra for the first time and seeing it in certain comment sections. And then it spread and spread and spread. And then it was everywhere. And then the larger meme culture of the proto-alt-right sort of took over. And here we are. How can people get started in this sort of thing now? Because with new technology, with short form video now increasingly dominating everything, have you had to change your approach? And even dumb it down necessarily from the 8th grade level to maybe even lower, like 4th grade level, because one thing that I've found is that people generally don't read. And as somebody who's predominantly a writer and an essayist, that's been kind of a tough adjustment, because if I write even a 1,200 word piece on something, nobody's going to read it. But if I do a 1-minute video on something, people are going to see it and they're going to talk about it.
Yeah, we have to deal with we have to deal with the hand we're dealt. That's the unfortunate truth you come to. I think one thing you need to jump in the type of activism that you can sustain for your lifestyle. A lot of times we get guys coming and going because what they're doing is not sustainable for their lifestyle. So you need to do something sustainable for your lifestyle. And it may just be passing around things over and over again to friends and family. It may be helping with short form videos. It may be helping with your favorite website on social media. But there's so much that can be done that is being done on a day-to-day basis. You can be getting involved in some type of local organization, or it can be all the above. It really depends on that person's lifestyle. But one thing I would tell you, the one killer is getting involved in something that's unsustainable. Because in America, for instance, you got a lot of young guys that want to be, they want to be a street activist. Well, for one, you need to have a lot of legal on your side, because we don't have any friends. So you got to worry about legal, and you got to worry about being able to travel vast distances very quickly, unlike Europe. And so that can be a big challenge in America. Online, the the field is wide open. You just want to be as creative as possible. And we have numerous new voices coming online. I see all the time in social media, whether it be Facebook, which I'm not on, or Instagram, which is also growing for whatever reason. Because of X, it's opened up, I guess, other avenues. And X, of course. But there's always all kinds of interesting commenters and people making various different points from various different angles that's going to reach it's going to reach this growing section of whites that are asking questions, and we want to give them the answers.
Right. Has there been anything that you've changed your mind about in terms of either the content or just in your approach in terms of messaging? Because you pointed out, as with the fax machine, there are certain technologies that, the medium is the message, as they say. And if you have a certain approach and then the way people communicate fundamentally changes, some might say the message itself has to change. I mean, the mantra, for example, might be too much for people now who are used to short form video to handle. Or do you think I'm being too pessimistic about this kind of thing?
Well, I think the memes teased out are just fine. The message itself was standalone for the times, but these things do evolve and they get shorter and shorter. I mean, I don't have to say diversity is a code word for white genocide.
Right, yeah.
Genocide. I don't have to. The whole entire idea of anti-racist code word for anti-white is we're fulfilling a need. Like, what do you do when someone calls you racist? You're just saying that because I'm white. Anti-racist is a code word for anti-white. The end goal is for a 7-year-old kid to walk in at the Thanksgiving dinner table and to yell at his uncle that he's anti-white and just freeze the place. To repeat the process that was done to us over the word racist. That cycle has to complete for us to win. And that's what we're doing, and that's what's occurring. But this is a process. The only thing that I would say that I've changed my mind on, but it's not necessarily that it's bad or good, because there are real conspiracies. America was founded on a conspiracy. The founding fathers thought the King of England was conspiring against them, and he was. So conspiracies, there are conspiracies that are provable, 2 or more people under Anglo-Saxon common law. Right. So conspiracies are real. White genocide is a very real conspiracy. The Great Replacement, these are all real. All you got to do is open up your eyes. But the weaponization of conspiracies and the weaponization of attacking conspiracy theorists is something that has been kind of eye-opening. Someone really thinks this stuff is dangerous and is really looking to counteract him. And I'm thinking of, the lawsuit against Alex Jones as compared to QAnon. QAnon, I thought, was very dangerous. Because it looked like some very sophisticated elements were taking advantage of people that were very religious in nature. And so I'm like, that's extreme. Whoever's doing this does not have good intentions. Because when I point to conspiracy or something like that, either, you're pointing fun, like, well, I don't know if Bigfoot exists, or you're pointing to something very real, like some kind of legal conspiracy, like the Great Replacement or white genocide. But the weaponization of conspiracy has had me back off on various different, that particular angle is like, well, that can be extremely dangerous for some audiences in this types of society based on who wants to take advantage of them.
Right. Yeah, there's 2 points there. I think both are worth discussing. One, of course, is the censorship angle, which was the Alex Jones lawsuit, where it is now established as a matter of American law that you have free speech, but not really. Because if the wrong judge takes it the wrong way, they just fine you infinity $1 billion, and that's the end of it. And of course, this only seems to go one way. You can make the most remarkable claims against right-wingers, and no judge in the country is going to take you seriously. And obviously, the big thing we have to worry about in the years going forward is, we saw it a little bit after 2020, but online censorship could come back in a big way. And again, we remember the old days. I mean, we basically had the run of the mill in 2012. I mean, you had unlimited free speech online for all intents and purposes, and we're probably never going to see that again. But the flip side of that, too, is you have the idea of conspiracy as entertainment, where I don't think a lot of these people are even trying to explain the truth. They're just sort of creating a story for clicks, to make money, or if you want to be conspiratorial about conspiracies, to deliberately set people down a false path. Like, you get them to believe a certain theory, but then there's nothing useful you can actually do with this information. Like, if you believe the world is being run by lizard people, like, what are you supposed to do with that? What is the political outcome of believing that, other than just becoming impotent, essentially? And
yeah, I'll entertain
some of that.
I'll entertain any conspiracy from the aspect like, well, that would be great if that were true. But yeah,
right.
I mean, I hope the enemy are shape-shifting lizards, for that matter. That would
make things easier.
It would make life easier. So I think I think there's a certain element of entertainment among conspiracies that have always been there, because I'm somewhat of a mini expert in conspiracies. My favorite book is Historical Popular Delusions and Madness of the Crowds. And I think it is the crowd.
Read that one.
The blueprint for understanding how crowds work, how memes work, and everything else. So conspiracies are always going to be there. If the elite are blaming conspiracies, it's typically because they're screwing up and they don't want to face the screw ups in the mirror. Right. Because conspiracies typically will go for you if you're doing well, like, oh, okay, he's a god, he's related to this ancient king or whatever.
Yeah,
if you're screwing up, conspiracies are going to obliterate you, but just because you're screwing up. So I see conspiracies as something that are prevalent in every society. But there seems to be an intention to weaponize certain conspiracies to hurt a lot of innocent white people, grannies and whatnot, who are just kind of like on the right wing side of things. And you could even say that's occurring on the left wing. And it isn't so much of like, okay, we have a ghost channel and we're watching ghost stories for fun, whatever, or investigating some kind of paranormal phenomenon. I consider that kind of entertaining and harmless. Or we're discussing whether or not you could have some kind of crypto existence of some type of big Yeti. That's always been around as well. It's not, that's harmless.
Yeah, that's not a thing.
But using AI or which is what I think they were playing with QAnon, in my opinion, using that to try to hurt people, I think is quite dangerous. And I think we have elements out there that are quite willing to do that against innocent whites, right and left.
Yeah. You definitely get this idea that there are people out there who are, I mean, you could argue that this is true of trannies and others like this, that they're sort of psychic casualties, and that there's a kind of malevolent meme warfare where if you deploy certain narratives, certain images, and now with AI, they're putting out images, especially older people, they honestly can't tell the difference.
Oh, no, it's bad.
These people are just broken. I mean, I remember just with this recent shooting in Minneapolis, you had a former commander of special forces like spam posting this image saying like, look at this, isn't this the worst thing ever? And it was supposedly an image from the shooting. And of course it was AI. Like, one of the ICE agents didn't have a head. But like, he didn't even notice this. He was just like tweeting it out constantly. Like, look at this. Can you see? And it's like, well, if this guy is falling for it, I mean, what chance do normal people have looking at this stuff?
It's become extremely dangerous. This is something that now the EU is grappling with X right now over AI and manipulation of AI images. On some level, I think that's something society as a whole has to take on. I just don't trust the people trying to take it on.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of my opinion too.
I do understand that. I mean, having AI undress little girls, that's in very poor taste. I mean, I can't imagine anyone doing that. You'd be crazy. Should that be illegal? Should you ban something like that? Well, there's a lot of things I'd like to ban if I were in charge.
Right, yeah.
Nonetheless, you start dealing with the misuse of AI, and it's going to get crazy. It already is, actually.
Do you think AI could fundamentally jeopardize the way you operate in terms of messaging? Because then you're at the point where you're no longer trying to give people a way to interpret the events they're seeing, but we can no longer even agree on what we're actually seeing anymore.
Yeah, well, what we're watching is the destruction of the truth. And what we have an advantage in front of this destruction of the truth, in that we have a growing people that know what they see in front of their own eyes. That's all you need. You just take the bananas out of your ears and open up your own eyes.
Right.
Diversity always means fewer white people. If a corporation says this, we need more diversity, there's too many white people there. If a neighborhood says we have a lot of diversity, there's very few white kids playing there. So we have this basic observation that is baking into a large part of the white population. So we're going to be okay off that, the messaging going toward white survival. But the destruction of the truth will definitely, it's already playing out in a particular key event.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to know what's true in the first run because AI is going to get more and more advanced. And these different elements, whether it be on the right or the left, that have no interest in us whatsoever, that want to go at it with these particular, they've got this, they got this captive group, libtards versus the magatards, and they just want to roll with this captive group, whether it be for money, whether it be for some kind of evil intent. We don't know. We can only speculate. It's going to prove to be very dangerous, I would say.
Yeah, I think it is going to come to a point. Everybody makes fun of, especially older people, for not being able to tell what's AI slop and what's not. But there will come a point where none of us can tell anymore.
Yeah.
And that
it's
seems
like,
to be
did they
more or
just
less
start a
inevitable.
war in the South China Sea, or is it AI? I mean,
yeah, right. How could you even know?
It's going to be, there's always been a problem with truth in war. So there's going to be a huge challenge. Right. And that's only getting more by the day. I don't have a solution to that other than, white people always try to ask on a subconscious level, at least, what is true. And so you're always going to have the truth on your side if you have time on your side. And we have to just keep on hammering our basic truth across the board. The challenge comes into is that, you've got these various different sides that are brainwashed into their version of the truth, into some kind of religious zeal. And staying the hell away from them is what'll be key. Because they're going to prove to be very dangerous and fertile ground for some very dangerous elements, as we've already seen, whether it be with QAnon elements, which may be just like some kind of little.
You think that was like an experiment in some ways?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do for some. I mean, in some cases, I think it was people making money. In some cases, I think it was people having fun. But I think it was a dangerous experiment involving AI that was getting out of hand. I can't prove that, but that's my gut feel. And whoever that is going to be back.
Right. Last question. I mean, what would you say is the core message that you want people to take away? And where can they find you and learn about these kinds of techniques, and how can they get involved?
Well, typically these days, I've always done a thing where I do news and views. That's how we paid for everything, as I ran a paywall for years. That is all free. And that's one of the big changes I've made. Everything's live streamed out Sunday, generally Wednesday, Friday. Sometimes there's a special interview on another day. But whiterabbitradio.biz has all my links, as well as the same link page for timmurdock.com, MURDOCK. You can get all the links there. There are a variety of different ways you can watch me. Odyssey, Rumble. There's a handful of different others that we have to take things down. Like I have a private YouTube that I stream out, but I have to take it down afterwards.
Yeah,
Kick,
right.
I'm up on X doing various different things. So, there's a variety of different ways to reach me if you have a question about something. And plus we have the website, whiterabbitradio.com. So everything's always up there.
Well, I encourage everybody to check this out. I mean, again, really my entire life has been watching some of the concepts that you've developed go from fringe to mainstream. And I can't think of a better definition of political success than that. So thank you for everything you've done, and congratulations, and keep up the good work.
I had a lot of help, and I was taught by someone that had a very good, long track record of failures and success in political messaging. So I kind of had that advantage, but had a lot of help. So I have to give credit where credit's due, but thank you very much for the kind words and having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Cheers.
So last Thursday on the live stream, we had Hugo Lennon, a.k.a. Auspill, on to talk about Australia Day and the battle for free speech down under. And it went down. They had their demonstration. 26 was Australia Day. By all accounts, a huge success. Here's an excerpt from his speech.
There is a new way of nationalism in this country. And we're not sorry. No. Sorry for what? Yeah. We're not sorry for being Australian. We're not sorry for being white. And we're not sorry for being proud of this country. Yeah.
There's nothing radical about this. This should be common sense. You should be allowed to celebrate your own country. And if you're an American, yeah, you have a stake at what's happening here. There's nothing you can say about Australia that you can't say about America. If you delegitimize and deconstruct Australia, you're going to be able to deconstruct and delegitimize America. This is the reality. And of course, that is happening. There were the usual acts of violence from the left, like you see here. Again, guy gets stabbed. Nobody cares. No arrests. Not that I saw. Same thing here.
Aboriginal land! Good try, mate. Aboriginal land! Fuck out of here, bitch! Get the fucking fuck out of here! Aboriginal land! Aboriginal land! Aboriginal land! Get the fuck out!
You guys want to do something about this? Look at this as assault happening right in front of you. Don't be so impotent.
But you may have seen this image. Under the new hate speech laws, there was an arrest. This man was arrested. He got the little Indian cop holding on to him. Here's the footage now. Now, he was arrested for this speech.
Go ahead, mate. I need to drag on for a few minutes. I'll say it quickly. The fact is that all these politicians that came up here spoke about bravery, all that bullshit, because they don't know what it means. They came up here, gave you a bunch of words, but none of them called out the fact that the hate speech laws were pushed by the Australian, the Jewish lobby groups in Australia. They were behind it all. They were behind it all. The Jews are the greatest enemy to this nation. They always have been. They're an enemy to Western civilization. And for thousands of years, Christians and Anglos, the white man has known that the Jew is our greatest enemy. Free Joel Davis, hail White Australia, and hail Thomas Sowell.
Okay. So, this is an American Renaissance program. Obviously, this is not American Renaissance's stance. I don't think I'm surprising anyone with this. You can criticize it if you want, but I'm not breaking any new policies here. But I also don't think I'm exceeding policy by saying that we don't think people should be arrested for this. We actually do believe in free speech, and it is a crime that a government is arresting somebody for saying this. This guy's name is Brendan Koshel, currently being held without bail on the charge of publicly inciting hatred on ground of race, causing fear. Incidentally, it was the same magistrate who ruled that Joel Davis would be held without bail. Now, compare that to this.
Citizen arrest. Okay, why do you fucking kill yourself, mate?
What did he else
Why
say?
don't you? Yeah. I hope the white genocide does happen because you guys are cunts. Yeah. That's all. Fuck your flag. Fuck this genocidal country. 2025, 2024, the highest years for Aboriginal deaths in custody, and you just stand there like a fucking nobody, waving around your
My grandfather fought at
bullshit
Gallipoli.
flag.
That's why I'm wearing my poppies.
The Gallipoli, cool. That's cool. Fucking
people
cool,
like
isn't
you.
it? We have an army that also fucking takes advantage of Indigenous people. You know, our army fucking takes advantage of Aboriginal.
Now, if we want to talk about explicit threats, I hope there is white genocide seems to be up there. That seems like incitement to violence. That's very straightforward. And yet we know with total certainty there will be no charges. And there never will be charges, because law is a question of who, not what. It's a question of who benefits. It's not a question of what the law says. And that's why you have to oppose these kinds of hate speech laws no matter what. There's no way to weaponize them for your own side. They're never going to be applied to protect you. They are always intended to only go after whites. And yeah, they're going to go after the extremes. But you're out of your mind if you don't think that will expand. And if you don't think their fate will eventually be yours. Look at what's already happened in the UK. Look at what's already happened in Canada. Australian leaders, or should I say the anti-Australian leaders running the country, have been very clear that to preserve multiculturalism, they are willing to sacrifice traditional liberties. Well, if that's the case, then it's multiculturalism that needs to go. Australia is probably the greatest example in history of whites carving out a great nation out of a very hostile wilderness, and right now it is being destroyed. It's being destroyed out of sheer spite. It is not a free country, it is under hostile occupation, and Americans need to do all we can to support free speech down under. You know why? Because if we don't, it's coming here. See you next time. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.